at the UiPath startup screen, and I'm going to create a new process. I will call this new process O5 string variables. I'll leave everything else as the default and click Create. Variables are just names of locations in memory that hold data to be retrieved later. And they are called variables because the data in that memory location can be updated or vary while the program is running. I will click on the Variables tab to open up the Variables panel. And we see that there are 4 parts to a variable. We have the name, variable type, variable scope, and default. In the Variables panel, it says select an activity to set the variable scope. And up in the design window, we see drop activity here or generate with autopilot. I'm going to click on the drop activity here. We see the cell below name in the variable panel has the value create variable in light gray. I will click on that. That cell changes and UiPath Studio adds in a default variable with the name variable1. The default type is string, the default scope is main sequence, and then under default, it says enter a VB expression. To change the name of variable1, I will click in the variable1 cell. To select the whole variable name, I can double click on it. From there, I can press delete or backspace and clear out that cell. Then I will type in str_name. I'm using the prefix str_ because I want you all to know when we're looking at this variable, no matter where it is in the UiPath code, we will know that it is a variable type of string. We do not need to add the prefix to our variable. In fact, some people are very much against adding the variable type as a variable prefix. The reason they say is because it is not VBA standard. If you end up working for a company that does not want you to use prefixes, don't use the prefixes. For this tutorial series, or at least for now, I'm going to use prefixes, mainly because many of you will be new to programming, and I think having the variable type as a prefix will help us all out. When looking at a variable, we will be able to tell exactly what type of variable we're looking at just by looking at the variable name. Variable names can have up to 30 characters, so there should be enough characters to add in the prefix without any issues. I will tab over to the variable type, and we see a drop-down arrow appear. I will click that drop-down arrow, and we see a couple of different variable types, and at the bottom, we see Browse for Types. That means if we don't see the variable type we're looking for in this drop-down, we can click on this Browse for Types and choose a variable type that is not in the drop-down. We will do that, just not in this video. Going over to the scope, we see that our variable str_name has a variable scope of main sequence. And I will give it a default value of UiPath. We've assigned our variable the value of UiPath, but we're not doing anything with it. I will add in an activity of log message, and I will paste in the message, quote, the value of str_name is : space, end quote, and then I will add a space plus sign and then another space, and the plus sign will concatenate the two strings, which means treat the two strings as a single string. And a string is just text inside of double quotes. We see that the variable we created, str_name, holds the value double quote UiPath double quote. So when we type in str, and we see that UiPath is trying to help us out by giving us suggestions of what we might want to put in after that plus sign. And it highlights str_name, which I want, so I will press enter. And it auto-completes str_name into our message text. So typing strname is the same thing as typing double quote UiPath double quote. Let's give this a log level of info. And I'm going to change the log message title to be log str underscore name. And let's run this by clicking on the debug file play button. And we see in the output panel, the value of str underscore name is : space UiPath. Now I'm going to add a sequence into our workflow. And I'm going to change the sequence title name from sequence to child sequence. And what exactly is the sequence a child of? Well, that is the main sequence. And the main sequence is a workflow container. We just don't see it show as a container like the one we just added. We can think of the design panel itself as the main sequence container. I will add in an assign activity into our child sequence and change the activity title to be update str underscore name. In the save to, I will add str underscore name. And what I want to update that to is double quote, updated UiPath string, double quote. And I will copy this log message, copy, and paste it right after here in the child sequence. And now we'll change this to be log updated string name. The message will say the updated value of string name is, and we'll leave the log level as info. And let's run this by clicking the debug play button. And in the output, we see the log messages. The value of string name is UiPath, and the updated value of string name is updated UiPath string. So everything is working as expected at the moment. So I'm going to add a new variable into our child sequence. I'll do that with an assign. And I can click in the save to and press Control K. We see the set var right here. But another way to do that is to click in the to variable in the properties window. I'm going to press Control K and we see set var, and I will paste in the value str underscore child seq for sequence name. And when I press enter, it does not update the assign until I click on the assign. But then it adds it to the save to, because this save to and this to variable are the same value. And we'll also see it down here in our variables panel. And then the value I want to assign this new child sequence name is double quote child RPA str value. Let's also change this assign title to assign str child name. One other thing I want to point out right now is notice the scope of our new variable string child sequence name has a scope of child sequence, whereas the other one has a scope of the main sequence. I'm inside the child sequence workflow. If I click outside of the child sequence workflow, we no longer see that child sequence name. So it's only available while inside of the child sequence workflow. I'm going to add in a log message so we can print out our new variable. We'll change the log message to log child name. I'll paste in the message. Child name is quote space str underscore child seq name. And we will give this a log level of info. Let's run this, make sure it's working okay. And down in the output, we see our three messages, the value of the string name, the updated string name, and then our child name is child RPA string value. I want to change the name of our child variable from child seq name to child name. When I press enter, we see that it changes the variable everywhere it's found in this workflow. Now, when I say everywhere it's found in the workflow, I mean in the activities themselves. Inside of a title, like up here where we have assign child name, that would not be updated. But in the activities themselves, those all got updated as expected. And if we change it in the activity, it's not going to change them all, obviously, because we wouldn't want it to change it if we typed in the wrong variable name. So it only updates all of them when we're down in the variables panel. So we saw earlier that if I click outside the sequence workflow, the string child name disappears. So what happens if we drag and drop this log message into the main sequence workflow? We get an error, and hovering over it, we see that the string child name is not declared. It may be inaccessible due to protection level, which is exactly what happened. And that's because the variable is not found outside of that sequence. Now, to change this, I could just drag and drop our log message back inside of our child sequence, but I need it here for some reason or another. So what I'll do is I'll click inside the child sequence to show our variable name, and then clicking on the scope, I can change that to main sequence. And when I click back in the main sequence, our error message goes away. And now we see it because it is found inside of the main sequence. But I cannot click on it here and change it back into the child sequence. I only see the main sequence as an option. So to change the scope back to just the child sequence, I'm going to right click on it here and delete it and add it back in the child sequence workflow. I'll do that by double clicking to select all and press Control X to delete it, then Control K to set the variable, and then Control V to paste it back in. Pressing enter, we now have our string child name back with the scope of child sequence, variable type string, and now I will drag and drop this log message back into our child sequence and the error goes away. So the child container activity inherits variables from the parent container activity, the same way a child inherits its eye color or hair color from its parents. So if only one parent has the gene for green eyes, the child will have that gene, but the child cannot give that gene to the other parent that does not have the green eye gene. The child will pass on that green eye gene to all of its children. So we see the same thing here with the UiPath child sequence. It will pass the variables down, but not up. So why does UiPath do it this way? Well, there's two reasons. The first one is security. If the parent container needs a single secure field from a record with a lot of secured fields on it, the child container can read in that record with all the secured fields and only pass the single necessary field back to the parent container. That way it is not exposing all the secure data to the parent container. The second reason is to help with memory usage. Once a child container is done, that container and all the data in that child container scope can be cleared out of memory. To sum things up, a string variable is just some text in double quotes in a memory location that we can access by the variable name. The only variable type we've looked at so far is string. We also looked at the scope of a variable and saw that a variable is only available to the workflow container the scope is defined as and all of its child container workflows, but not the parent workflow container and above. And this is done for security and to help with memory. In the next video, we will look at using numeric variables in UiPath Studio.